At the age of 71, I found out my wife was having a child with another man, which led to a tough decision: continue the marriage or choose divorce. Welcome to the Butterfly Tumblr Radio channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I exclaimed into my cell phone as I drove west on the interstate nearly 2 hours from Columbus on a lovely July Sunday. The sun was shining brightly. While I spoke loudly on the phone, I was driving down the highway at a modest speed, the windows down and the hatch open. The car resembled a wind tunnel, but the engine purred consistently and behaved no worse than a more expensive vehicle. My car was a 1996 Ford Probe, one of Detroit's most expensive vehicles, and it belonged only to me. During our recent trip to Washington, my wife gave me a retirement gift the next day, which I picked up. I couldn't contain my excitement and yelled to Melinda, "It's simply amazing." She responded with a smile. "I'm delighted you like it. Just remember to use it carefully and avoid expensive speeding charges." Grinning, I assured her, "Don't worry, I'm just slightly over the speed limit and the road is empty. It will be all right, okay, I'll see you tomorrow night." She added, wrapping up the chat. I hurled the phone onto the vacant passenger seat and let out a happy yell. I'd been driving for about 5 hours and planned to stop in Columbus for dinner and a night. As part of my journey, I had previously reserved a hotel room at 63. I didn't think I could handle 12 hours of driving in one day like I might at 35 or 45. If Melinda were with me, we could take turns driving and possibly do the journey in one day. However, I was alone on my adventure. I've always been a fan of the Probe, ever since I had the opportunity to take a test drive. It was the first model of the new Ford in 1989, and several dealerships in my region acquire such vehicles. I was immediately drawn to its appearance. After waiting a week, I decided to go to the local Ford dealership and test drive the automobile. It was an instantaneous connection. The original Mazda engine was not only quick and powerful, but it also had exceptional fuel efficiency. The automobile's handling was extremely responsive, resembling a racing car. A modest turn of the steering wheel caused the automobile to quickly shift on the road. It was simply great. I drove my first car for 11 years, followed by another 11 years in the second. I purchased the second automobile in 1996. It was in its final model year and had traveled nearly 20,000 m before colliding with another vehicle. It was not my fault. I tried to find a replacement on eBay and other websites, but was unable as a result. I've been driving an ordinary, uninteresting vehicle for the past 2 years. After 40 years in the insurance sector, I recently retired Ed. Although the job was repetitive, the income was adequate and I was able to retire a few years before turning 65. My colleagues planned a small farewell party for me, which was attended by my wife. They gave me wonderful gifts, but the most memorable part was when my wife handed me the car key. I was surprised to receive one of my old auto keys, along with the note. It turned out that my daughter and son, while hunting for a car for me, discovered one in fantastic shape with minimal mileage near Washington. The plan was for me to travel to Washington for the weekend, spend time with my family, then drive 7 hours to Columbus and spend the night after breakfast. On Monday, I would continue my trek and return home early in the morning. Melinda booked the hotel for Sunday, which baffled me at first, since I assumed she would join me and we would leave right away. But she clarified that I was going on this trip alone to get to know my new car, a black Jeep GDE Turbo. In the 1990s, Ford began producing Probe engines, making them the only options. The car featured a turbocharged V6 engine that created a loud roar but was less fuel efficient than the 4-cylinder Mazda engine. The journey started in the mountains of West Virginia. An interesting yet perilous challenge. Driving in many lanes, disregarding speed restrictions, avoiding heavy trucks, taking sharp curves and abruptly changing lanes. All of this resulted in a hectic and challenging environment that was not for the faint of heart. Based on my previous experiences with the other 2 test participants, I am convinced that this vehicle will be able to conquer any hurdles in its path. Personally, I enjoy driving in the highlands, but after that the rest of the trip is primarily on a straight highway, which can be monotonous because I can't fully utilize the car's capabilities. The speed limit frequently decreases to 60 or 65, so I drive around 70 or 75. However, it is critical to be vigilant, because there are numerous police officers here, particularly in Ohio. After talking with Melinda, I stopped at a petrol station and purchased a Coke from the store. The cashier looked at me, then at my car. "It's an excellent vehicle, sir. Is this a probe?" His expertise was astounding, especially given that he was probably not even alive when the car stopped being made. "Yes, that's her," I said proudly, standing tall. It was a retirement gift that purchased in Washington and am now bringing back to Illinois. "Wow, she's adorable," the young cashier observed as I nodded and confidently returned to my car to brag a little. I gripped the clutch for a second before moving gears and screeching the tires slightly. This is not always possible with a front-wheel drive vehicle. While driving, I reflected about the past weekend. I enjoy the time I spend with my daughter, her husband, and our only grandson. Now that I'm retired, I've made an implicit commitment to spend more time with my grandson in person. Although I was delighted to see him over FaceTime, nothing could match his personal presence. I drove past a car full of teenage girls. They hunted their horns in greeting and my gray hair flapped in the breeze. A short glance at the girl behind the wheel reminded me of Melinda in her youth, who had long blonde hair, an elegant body and blue eyes. She reminded me of Melinda. The life of the party. She wasn't the same as when she was younger, even at the age of 63. She was a wonderful woman. Despite the extra pounds and possibly more artificial blonde hair than natural, she continues to capture the attention of her contemporaries and even some young individuals. Last fall I considered asking her to the museum's opening, where she bravely wore a revealing pink sweater. I could tell she was hesitant to wear such a daring clothing in public, but she did it because she knew I enjoyed the look. I thanked her for the gesture to show my thanks. I met Melinda during my sophomore year at Indiana State University. She had just moved into the dorm where I had been staying for the previous 2 years when my buddies and I were outside playing frisbee. Melinda arrived with her folks to check in. As soon as I noticed her, I was mesmerized. My obsession was so clear that one of my pals accidentally smacked me with a toss. I was ecstatic. Needless to say, I'll never forget this night. I paused my game and approached Melinda and her family, offering my assistance. Unfortunately, Melinda's father did not appear to approve of my long curly hair and politely denied my offer. When I realized his reaction, I took a step back. A week later I saw Melinda in the dorm and introduced myself. I swiftly retreated, sensing her disinterest. 2 weeks later I saw her strolling with a guy from the dorm who lived 2 floors up. He resembled a nerd with a short bristly mustache. It was obvious that I was not her type, but this didn't worry me at all. I occasionally ran across her in the dorm and had polite discussions with her. Because she was not a member of my social group, I didn't feel the urge to communicate with her. She showed no interest either. I didn't want to make any effort to pursue her. Maybe I wasn't regarded a romantic ideal, but I did well with other girls. I did not feel the need to confront someone's negative attitude. 2 years later she suddenly attended a semester party held by mutual friends. Mr. Bristly Mustache had already graduated from university and she arrived alone. I resolved to try again, knowing that if I was met with rejection or a nasty attitude, I could simply move on. Nothing nasty or bad. Melinda stood out from other business students during a period when there were few women in his sector. Despite her modest demeanor, many of the business students on my floor perceived her as overbearing. They seemed to be terrified of her intelligence and defiance of standard corporate rules. When I spoke with her, I didn't expect much, but it was clear that she disliked being alone in a crowded setting. When I approached her, I observed she was really scared. Her behavior was akin to that of a drowning person. When offered assistance, "Do you always take 2 beers?" she asked harshly, while carefully inspecting the glasses in my hands. I nearly made a sarcastic remark, but kept my lips quiet. Mostly I responded dispassionately. I'm an adaptable guy. Therefore I try not to indicate my preference. As I turned to leave, she shook her head slightly to my Aston M. She reached out and caressed my right forearm, which stopped me in my tracks and invaded my personal space at my height. I towered over her, but she stood on tiptoe, grabbed my shoulders and brought me closer, kissing me tenderly on the lips. She left me shocked, stepping back. She stood on tiptoe, her gorgeous blue eyes enthralling me as I held her near. I softly kissed her, careful not to spill the beer in my hands. We decided to leave the party and spend the next several hours speaking in a quiet corner of the dorm's living room. We were inseparable after that and finally got married soon after graduating from university. Although her parents were against our relationship, I didn't care what they thought. After graduating from university, we both secured fantastic careers and resumed our normal lives. We continued to sleep together, but not as frequently as when we were students. Brianna emerged in our family 3 years after the wedding, bringing us both enormous happiness. We frequently competed to have her in our arms, especially when we visited her grandparents. Brianna seemed to walk on air for the first 2 years of her life while we were in their place. I felt joy, as I remembered those early years. When I looked up, I noticed the first exit from Columbus approaching, but I didn't pay attention. All I wanted was to be home with my wife, Melinda. The notion of seeing her again prompted me to leave the motel room. I paused, cancelled the room and considered phoning Melinda to let her know I was on my way. I decided to surprise her by getting home in the middle of the night and climbing into bed with her. Just 2 hours after leaving Columbus, I went to a restaurant near a bus station. I called Melinda and pretended to check on her from my hotel room. She sounded anxious and out of breath, implying that she had left her phone somewhere and hurriedly answered the phone. "Hey, save your breath for me tomorrow." I taunted her as she took up the phone. "Of sure, honey." She responded. I said "I've missed you so much" sounded honest. We talked a little longer before I confirmed our intentions to meet the following day. She merely replied with a quiet, "Ha ha," and we said goodbye. After swiftly eating my breakfast and refueling the petrol tank, I went out again. The windows and hatch were closed for the night and the howling wind was no longer a distraction. The sensor functioned flawlessly and I drove on. I couldn't help but smile as I remembered how my wife and son-in-law had put me to the test. 39 years of lovely memories rushed across my head and I wondered where the time had gone by 4:30 p.m. I had already arrived home, leaving my Ford Probe parked on the street. I intended to bring my new bike to the garage, but when I arrived with the remote control in my hands, I discovered that someone else's automobile had parked in my customary spot. As I stood next to my wife's car, a sudden rush of terror overcame me, causing my limbs to shiver and beads of sweat to form on my forehead. It appeared that I was on the edge of a heart attack. After taking a deep breath, I was able to relax and the sensations began to subside. However, the unknown car remained parked outside my wife's house, leaving me perplexed and lost. When I turned off the engine, my memories appeared to distort. For a second I sat in disbelief staring at the Mercedes that had snatched my parking space. After some consideration, I decided to enter the garage and open the passenger door of the strange vehicle. I discovered the registration number in the glove compartment and my heart fell when I saw it belonged to Melinda's former boss, Gregory Pute, who retired 6 months ago. Disappointed, I decided to sneak into the house, take my 9mm SIG Sauer and confront both of them. After reflecting on the physical conflict, I determined it was not worth going to jail. I crept silently into the home and into the bedroom, which was eerily silent. The door was locked, but I cautiously unlocked it and entered to discover were Melinda and Gregory Pute lying on my bed. My wife was hanging to his right shoulder. His arm firmly curled around her, which reminded me of how Melinda and I used to sleep. The way they hugged each other felt familiar. Like if it wasn't the first time. I couldn't help but enjoy the iPhone's wonderful night mode feature. I put down my phone after taking 2 clear photographs in a softly lit environment. I calmly grabbed enough clothes from the drawers and closet to last several days before stumbling into a suitcase in the hallway closet. I hastily grabbed my belongings and hurried left carrying my weapon. I left the house again, this time creeping back through the garage. I got out a knife and punctured all 4 tires of Melinda and Gregory's automobiles. Then I jumped in my car and drove to a neighboring location to witness from a distance Melinda. As a pensioner could get adequate sleep, but Gregory had to leave for work early to avoid raising suspicion from the neighbors. The car was parked conspicuously, with all 4 tires flat, making it difficult to ignore the damage. Even if you hadn't looked closely when Gregory started the engine while sitting in the garage, his automobile sensors would have promptly alerted him to the problem. I couldn't see what was going on, but around 8:30 a truck from Fred's tire business arrived as they were replacing the tires. I couldn't help but worry if Gregory had paid for Melinda's tires or if she had to foot the bill alone. I also wondered if they would be brave enough to go to the police, even if they were unaware of my role in causing the damage. Involving law enforcement would raise a lot of questions, especially because I had to be home early in the morning after Gregory left at 10:00. I imagined Melinda had raced to change the bedclothes and remove any evidence of Gregory's presence from the house. I traveled to Omaha, Nebraska, to visit a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. Melinda called when I didn't come by 3:00, so I answered fast. I made AM note that I would soon install Bluetooth in my old probe. "Where are you now?" she asked carefully. "You should be home." "I'm on the interstate in Iowa." "On my way to Spencer," I responded monotonously. "What are you doing in Iowa?" "I know you enjoy driving, but do you love this car more than I do?" "Yes," I answered honestly. Before hanging up the phone, I paused and texted her a photo of Gregory asleep in her bed. There was no response, so I proceeded on my route, pounding the throttle pedal for 3 days. Spencer and Marion tolerated my grumpiness while I kept them up to date on the newest events. Being surrounded by old friends during a tough time became a source of comfort to me, although I didn't say anything until the end of the visit. When speaking with old friends, it became clear that words were not always necessary to show love and support. Marion hugged me warmly as I prepared to leave, assuring me that she and Spencer would always find a home for me, regardless of the circumstances. This voyage home was less thrilling than the prior ones. I don't believe I've ever surpassed the speed limit in traffic, because it took me more than 6 hours behind the vehicle to process my sadness and thoughts. I was lamenting the end of my marriage, since I was pretty certain that we would not be celebrating our 40th anniversary together. I was thinking about the same familiar questions. Have I made a mistake? Can I satisfy Melinda in bed? Did she find solace with another man? What does the future hold for me without Melinda? After so many years, I considered forgiving her and trying to repair our marriage if she wanted to, but I quickly brushed the thought aside deep down. I knew I'd never forget the vision of them cuddling in her bed. I saw that true forgiveness entails the ability to forget, and I knew that if I stayed, I would just grow bitter and resentful. In the end, I concluded divorce was the best option for both of us. Despite the anguish, Melinda's Lincoln was the only vehicle in the garage when I opened it. I collected my belongings from the trunk and entered the house, where Melinda sat on the couch in the family room, a glass of red wine beside her. I grabbed a Corona from the fridge and sat down in an armchair. When we met, I noticed Melinda's eyes welling up with tears. I could see the misery on her face as she sat up slightly, but she did not cry. I asked her to stop, reminding her that I could not bear her pity. If anyone had justification to cry at that point, it was me. How could she betray us like that? How could she have betrayed me? 39 years have elapsed in a second. I believe some of them were real. Perhaps the first 10 or 20 years. When did she quit loving me? Ethan, I want you to know that my feelings for you have never changed. She whispered. It grew stronger over time, despite the agony I have caused you. I'm not sure how to solve things, but I know your feelings for me may not be as strong as they were before. How long has it been going on? I refuse to believe that this was an isolated incident. Your statements imply that this has occurred more frequently than you care to admit. Is anyone else involved in this? Have you cheated on our friends? When I posed the final question, her countenance shifted from terror to rage. I wondered if I had learned some awful truth. How could you say I would betray you with one of our friends? This is completely outrageous and disrespectful. she snapped, her voice brimming with rage and hate. The charge appears to be close to reality. I interrupted, my dear. She made a disgruntled sound before falling silent. Her look grew tired, as if she feared I would damage her. She knows me well enough to understand that I would never injure her, no matter how I appear from the outside. She began to talk but immediately stopped when she realized I could see her eyes. In settings where dishonesty is well entrenched, honesty is usually the best option. He is the only one, she corrected herself. This has been going on for some years, perhaps 5 or 6. I felt dizzy, and I'm sure my eyebrows lifted when I heard about this time frame. We began dating once or twice a week. As soon as we felt comfortable with each other. On your business trips, I generally remain alone for a few nights. She remarked calmly, as if we were having a straightforward chat about algebra or history for 5 or 6 years once or twice a week. It occurred to me that I must be either quite naive or exceedingly trustworthy. It's not that you complicated matters, she explained. You absolutely trust me, so I only had to come up with a plausible cause for my absence. I apologize for putting my trust in my wife for almost 30 years. I responded by tossing my head back and finishing my beer. When I got up to buy another beer, I noticed that her glass was also empty. Another one? I asked. Yes, please, she said pleasantly. I bought a new beer and filled her glass with wine before sitting back in the chair, leaning forward. Why didn't you just let me know you were unhappy? I could have done something differently, or we could have parted on better terms. I recommended, but I am not unhappy and do not want to divorce. She spoke bluntly. I've already told you I love you, and I truly meant it. I want us to grow old together. My expression must have reflected my perplexity. Listen, Alice, this is not Wonderland. You cannot cheat on me with a lover for years then expect me to transport you to the land of eternity on my white horse. In my own experience, this does not occur. That is why we are addressing this subject. Ethan, she said, referring to me by my full name, suggesting her disappointment or unhappiness with me. You're smart, and there's no reason we can't make a decision, even if this means breaking up with Gregory. I am being honest, Ethan, I care just about you. My relationship with Gregory is strictly physical. You could argue it's simply intimacy. Although our closeness is undeniably pleasant, it is simply a small portion of what binds us. Our relationship is much deeper. Why did you decide to give up everything right now? I sat stunned, unable to comprehend her indifference to our relationship. It appeared that someone had taken my wife's spirit without my knowledge. Wait a minute. I eventually managed to say, do you really think I'll let you continue seeing Gregory? She retorted angrily, Ethan. The way you say that is extremely disrespectful. Feeling insulted, I quickly responded. I couldn't help but wonder where the loving woman I married 39 years ago, who promised to remain faithful until her death, had gone. Melinda, have you been having affairs for 5 or 6 years and don't recognize the seriousness of the situation? I inquired. What is going on with you, honey? I paid close attention to her expression as she sipped her wine. My God, I am so fortunate. Despite her age, she could not have been older than 53 and had the build of a 33-year-old woman. I had no idea this would quickly become a problem, as I discovered you remember how a few years ago, after menopause, you noticed that I appeared to have gained vitality. I nodded in agreement. We were both astounded by her renewed youth and have been enjoying it ever since. I'm not sure what a doctor called this phenomenon, but he said that about 10 of women experience it near the end of lives. When Melinda first started going through this, I saw her doctor as a source of support for her newfound energy. Despite our age, medical intervention allowed us to maintain a satisfactory intimate life. Throughout this time, Gregory complimented me on my radiant appearance and newfound vitality. We've been working as colleagues for about 4 years and have developed a strong friendship. We even engaged in frivolous flirting, which I found exciting. I was relieved to discover that at this point in my life, a man still finds me attractive and playful. I abruptly interrupted the conversation to remind her that I had always admired her incredible sensuality. I've tried to contact you several times in the hopes of deepening our relationship. Isn't it really important to you and my husband after all? She said. However, a completely different person expressed genuine interest in me, my friend. It was undeniably exciting. Later you had to leave for Houston on a short business trip. I don't remember why, but I ended up inviting Gregory to dinner with me on Saturday night. As one event led to another, I found myself taking him upstairs, and for the first time we really connected. This experience was thrilling and unforgettable. The excitement I felt stemmed from the forbidden nature of our meeting, as well as the fact that he was unlike anyone I had ever met before. Following the second round, we rested for a few hours before he left. Every time he arrived, we quietly parked his car in the garage, and he always left before dawn to avoid attracting the attention of the neighbors. We've always been careful. I couldn't stop laughing at the irony. Who did you want to impress among the neighbors? Obviously, it is not me. Considering that a man is in bed with my wife. It's difficult to believe in such a situation. You talking about respect? She shifted uncomfortably and sipped more wine. I must admit that I did not wake up feeling guilty about my actions. The only time I felt remorse was when you arrived home that night. I avoided you for several days, wondering if my transgressions were visible on my skin like a stain, but you didn't know anything, and since I didn't give away any of your belongings, my guilt subsided. It became almost easy to return for a second time and then a third time. I just wanted to make sure it wouldn't hurt you, yet you inadvertently gave him some of my belongings, although this is ultimately your body and you can do whatever you want with it. You promised to be faithful to me. I took our vows seriously 39 years ago, not realizing they had an expiration date hidden in the small print. Ethan, you are exaggerating. Have you considered the consequences of breaking up and living alone in a retirement apartment? What are we both gaining from this? Why did we start this conversation? I care about you, Ethan. I know you're unhappy with me, but deep down, you care about me. If you want me to end my connection with Gregory, I am ready. My fury erupted with renewed vigor, causing my blood pressure to soar. It seemed like we were talking about the future of our relationship, but she decided it was about her relationship with Gregory. I could not believe it. I don't want you to date Gregory anymore, especially while we're still married. I shouted at her after we break up, you can spend as much time with him as you like. I do not care divorce. That's not going to happen, Ethan. She said dispassionately. I hurriedly got up from my seat, put clean clothes in a suitcase, grabbed a few personal stuff and departed. I took my car to the nearest inexpensive motel and planned to stay there for the following few days. I was absolutely bewildered by Melinda's behavior. How could she not comprehend a man she had been married to for 39 years? The next day I called my old buddy and lawyer, William Lilly Joseph, and planned to see him for lunch. We chose an Italian restaurant where I shared within the painful events of my recent past over a superb VE and pepper sandwich. Willie and I have known one another since our days at Indiana State College, and he has known Melinda since we started dating. We even spent time with him and his wife on several occasions. Do you believe she has early signs of dementia? He asked, concerned. This is not Melinda's regular conduct, he added. I agree with what I said in answer. Perhaps someone will think I am soft when I instructed Willie to handle everything honestly. She had been by my side for 39 years and I saw no reason to suddenly become upset. I requested that Willie transfer the fully paid house to her and offer me with the equivalent amount in cash as compensation. I realized I'd never be able to return to this house without picturing them together in her bed. Do you honestly believe reconciliation is impossible? My friend, you've been together for a long time. You've grown old together. I could tell that this was as difficult for him as it was for me. Are the typical 2 paperwork timelines acceptable? Ethan, he inquired dispassionately. I was looking for a rush service and I'm willing to pay extra for it. Can you provide it by Friday? Why the rush? If you don't have a grudge. You did not finish the duties that I deemed required, for example, you did not go to the bank. I can't take her attitude. Willie. She's overly hopeful. Perhaps I'll change my mind and let her stay with Gregory. Wow, that is for sure. Friday is too early. It is critical to me that you grasp the gravity of the situation. Willie. Melinda continued to engage with me on the phone and in email and in the days that followed, expressing her wish to make peace, apologizing for the hurt and criticizing my evident intransigence and immaturity. But I couldn't help but observe her lack of remorse for her own conduct in the relationship. On Tuesday evening, I called my daughter and son-in-law to advise them of the divorce and its reasons. Their surprise matched mine when I discovered what had transpired, calming my worried thoughts about a conspiracy against me. Tears flowed, and after a little stillness, Brianna gingerly broached the subject of reconciliation. You've been together for so long and are now both retired. Isn't it time to unwind together by the fireplace with a bottle of wine? She suggested quietly. That was the original plan, sweetheart, I explained, but your mother has a different point of view. She believes that if I let go of my anger, everything will fall into place. However, this was not a one-time blunder. Their affair has lasted over 5 years and they have even had an intimate relationship in her own bed. I caught them together in this bed right away. I emailed a photo of the sleeping lovebirds to my daughter's cell phone. Both she and Nathan let out a short sigh after hearing the notification sound. This horrific image is now etched in my consciousness and I'm worried it will never go. I recognize that the memories will fade with time, but the anguish will stay. It has been horrible for 39 years. She said, if you were in a similar scenario as Brianna, would you consider forgiving her after 5 years of having an affair with another man? The phone paused. I envisioned my daughter staring at Nathan, hoping for a forgiving response, but I knew Nathan's convictions were unwavering. No, Dad, I would not forgive her. He responded. I wouldn't rule out physical violence. Nathan, Brianna exclaimed. I'm only telling you the truth. Ellie, Nathan responded. If you ever did something like that to me, it would be a metaphor for death. Willie called at noon on Friday to inform Melinda that she had been served with a subpoena. Melinda, according to his co-worker, appeared astonished and then devastated. I arrived at the residence about 2 p.m. to pick up my remaining stuff. Melinda sat at the kitchen table holding a glass of wine and a half-empty bottle. As I passed her on my way to the stairs, she mumbled frustrated. You are really cruel. It's only been 4 days and you're already considering nursing home choices. Ethan, I have previously informed you that there will be no divorce. We'll fight this together. We will get over this and stay together for a long time. I love you. Everything remains the same. I shake my head, Melinda, this is not a farce. I refuse to settle for the role of an elderly guy. You've repeatedly breached our oaths, and because we're older, you believe I should forgive and forget, but I cannot forgive and I do not want to forget. Melinda, I believe you still love me, but it isn't the same the all-consuming love that it once was. Gregory changed everything. I was totally devoted to you. I had no backup plan or option. It was only us, and now everything seemed to have changed. Now it's just you, me, Gregory, and whoever follows Gregory. Tears run down her cheeks. A part of me wanted to hug her and assure her things would get better. My affection for it stayed strong, even after 39 years of marriage. Love does not go immediately. Despite the pain in my heart, I avoided using offensive remarks. I climbed the stairs in solitude. Melinda disputed the divorce proceedings and her lawyer persuaded the judge to schedule a counseling session for the pair. Willie urged that I obey the instructions and remain silent. I warn you that offending the judge will simply postpone the procedure. We both arrived to the first session a little earlier than expected. Melinda tried to talk to me in Dr. Ruth's waiting room, but I only responded briefly, since I didn't want to talk. She refused to be addressed as Dr. Ruth and instead took us to her office, despite being offered alcohol. We respectfully declined. The doctor then began to give out the basic guidelines. We couldn't yell at people, curse or interrupt. The first breach would result in a warning, whereas the second would result in the judge being told of the insubordination and the associated repercussions. I was considering what steps I should take when Dr. Ruth encouraged me to listen to others. When I remained mute, I took her suggestions into consideration. As someone who felt insulted, I was given the opportunity to share my perspective. First, Melinda was irritated and attempted to interrupt me, but the consultant stopped her. Melinda's opinion coincided with mine, except she added that due to my hectic work schedule, she found solace in a new acquaintance. When I was given the opportunity to answer, I told the consultant that I rarely go out, only a few days per month, which contradicts Melinda's claim that she is lonely. Dr. Allingham nodded and jotted down my explanation in his notepad. The doctor then inquired about the prospective repercussions of divorce. "Are you looking for success in this case, Mr. Ethan?" the doctor questioned. "No, I'm not trying to win," I responded, weary. "I don't believe you can find triumph here, only heartache. My only goal is to minimize my losses. The person who has been at the center of my life for nearly 4 decades is no longer with me. Everything swirled around her, but now that she's gone, there is no way to fill the emptiness. Perhaps I shall be alone in my old age, since the woman who meant everything to me did not regard our relationship enough to stay faithful for more than 5 years. Mr. Ethan, this seems to be a serious situation. You are not one for embellishing the truth, so why did it hurt so much?" "You're right, doctor, I often keep my emotions under control. However, this is unlike any other circumstance I've ever faced. It is not an exaggeration to say that she utterly devastated me. A few weeks ago, I felt invincible after retiring and receiving a car as a gift from my lovely wife, which I cherished greatly. We were pleased and planned a trip throughout the country to visit museums, zoos and other sites. It was a dream come true to go on a journey with the woman who held my heart, but my happiness was dashed when I found that her feelings for me did not equal mine. The only sound in the room at a time of heartbreaking quiet was the ticking of a wall clock. After hearing from everyone else, Dr. Allingham turned to Melinda and asked her to share her opinions. She began by expressing her tremendous affection for me, emphasizing that her love for me is unshakable. However, she emphasized that her concern is entirely about physical closeness, not their emotional relationship. Melinda repeated her earlier justifications to me, which made me distrust her remarks. Trying to conceal my boredom, I attempted to continue the discussion. What struck me was her habit of adding additional aspects to the story. The night after Gregory departed for Houston was the first time we really got close. We had a similar situation on Saturday night when we weren't at home. I felt embarrassed and lonely, so I invited Gregory to my apartment because you weren't at home. He seemed to interpret my invitation as something more so. He flirted with me more than normal when we started kissing. It felt like a natural extension of our friendship, and I knew we'd end up in bed together. It was a fantastic experience, the first time I had physically gotten close to someone other than you in our 42-year relationship. The knowledge that this was improper exacerbated the urgency of the situation. Despite the circumstances, he acted like a great gentleman during our encounter, making it even more memorable than normal. But it appeared to me that two good friends were simply enjoying each other's company. There's nothing more. I had no romantic sentiments for him and he did not have any for me, but there was a link between us. Following that we hug, as we frequently do. I admit that I love you. We're pals, close buddies. Surprisingly, I didn't feel as guilty as I had expected. You obviously didn't notice my feelings. I understood that as long as I don't take anything from you, we can stay friends. Even if you hadn't arrived home ahead of schedule, you would not have understood anything and would have loved me until the end. This issue may have been prevented. I took nothing away from you. Can we just dismiss what happened on Sunday night and return to what happened before? Is it truly all about your pride? It suddenly dawned on me. It's all about me and my sensitive ego. Dr. Allingham pointed out that our lesson was coming to an end. You weren't very cooperative today, Mr. Ethan. He said. I couldn't resist responding in a snarky tone. I did not shoot her today, did I? The consultant warned me sarcasm will not help you here. Mr. Ethan seemed frustrated, so I raced out of the office. When we arrived in the parking lot, Melinda attempted to initiate a discussion, but I preferred isolation when there was only the sound of traffic surrounding me. I got into my ancient car and took the highway east to the Indiana border. After driving for several hours, I stopped at a rest stop to refuel before pressing the gas pedal and returning home. It became a repetitive routine in my life, and I found peace only behind the wheel of my 16-year-old vehicle. Melinda and I were meant to meet after our individual consultations. I did not inquire about Melinda's conversation with the psychologist. It didn't matter to me. She probably wouldn't have shared anyhow. The doctor's swirling hand's directions perplexed me. She appeared to be attempting to persuade me to forgive Melinda, while also emphasizing the potential ramifications of refusing lonely old age. This is my current condition document. Despite her physical presence, I am nevertheless lonely. Once I saw this as a single hole in me, or part of that hole. However, since then she has separated herself from me, leaving us as distinct individuals. She ignores our relationship, since she is just concerned with herself. Gregory and I are in the background, but it appears like everything is now dependent on her. I stated my unwillingness to tolerate this scenario, but Dr. Willingham reminded me that she claims to love just me. She claims that her relationship with Gregory was not founded on love, but rather on physical attraction. Really, Doc, shouldn't you be a trained psychotherapist and counselor? Don't you realize the truth? So, Mr. Ethan, why don't you tell me your version, so I can understand what you're saying he proposed? Can I be honest, since we are alone here, or should I be cautious when I declare I am willing to be honest? Are you willing to listen to me? I believe Melinda still cares for me, but not as much as she used to. If that wasn't the case, she wouldn't consider being with another man. Personally, I do not believe in the justification that it is only a physical link. There appears to be some emotional connection between her and this guy. She stated that they are very close friends, leading me to feel that their relationship is more than just friendship. In my perspective, if you are completely committed to someone, you should not have feelings for anyone else. While I was speaking, I paid close attention to the doctor's reaction, seeing how he tried to maintain a neutral expression on his face. However, I witnessed a few instances where he couldn't contain his reaction. I asked the doctor what happens when your partner has an intimate relationship with someone else in your own bed. What does this indicate about their level of regard for you and when we discuss love and respect? How does the fact that it has been going on for almost 5 years influence that a brief affair can be brushed off as a passing fancy? But 5 years, is she underestimating my IQ, even if it is simply a matter of physical attraction? How do I overlook or forgive a 5-year betrayal? 5 years despite this. Everyone seems to believe that because we are older, I should simply forgive her and move on. What difference will it make if I spend our final years alone? I'm already lonely. She left me when she decided she wanted to be with him. It doesn't matter whether I live alone in an apartment or have my own room in her house. The results are the same. I simply need one more thing, Doctor. Despite admitting that she injured me and regrets her actions, she has never apologized for it. She loved another man's attention and willingly engaged in an affair, showing no regret, and she had ever shown regret to you. After finishing my monologue, I stood up and began pacing the room. Tired, I sank back into my chair. All of your points are valid, Mr. Ethan. We will have to discuss them at our next meeting. The source commented yes. I responded dispassionately when I stood up and left the room. I couldn't help but be surprised at my own ignorance. During my meeting with Melinda and Dr. Walling the next week, Dr. Wall and him began discussing a remedy to the problem, which made my head spin. Let us start with Melinda. He advised I do not want to end my relationship with Ethan. I genuinely believe that we will be able to overcome this and return to a happy existence on contemplation. I recognized that my past apologies to him were insufficient to demonstrate genuine regret for breaching his confidence, which, as I now see, caused him extra agony. Ethan, please forgive me. I genuinely regret my behavior and do not want our relationship to end this way after so many years together. You deserve more." While Melinda was apologizing, I caught a glimpse of the doctor's smirk, which swiftly faded. When our gazes collided, the deafening silence in my mind was awful. I am grateful to my parents for teaching me that beating women is unacceptable. Otherwise I might have done something regretful. I told Dr. Allenham that the fact that you've been close to him for over 5 years demonstrates that you don't regret it. Perhaps I could forgive sleeping with him once or twice. Maybe I could forgive a silly conduct when inebriated and breaching an oath, but I can't immediately forgive him after sleeping with him for over 5 years. It does not reflect my essence. Melinda became extremely disturbed by my response. The doctor, on the other hand, appeared astonished and began furiously jotting notes. Despite knowing that I would most likely be chastised for my actions, I couldn't help but express my dissatisfaction. It had been 2 months since our breakup, so I asked Melinda without waiting for an answer, "How many times have you been with him since my departure?" Melinda's face became hot crimson. It was hard for her to speak. The doctor's expression conveyed her shame. I wasn't sure if the lack of reaction was due to embarrassment or my own knowledge. For a brief moment, I felt a burst of satisfaction. I hoped that what was going on wasn't happening in her former bed. Melinda did not say anything. I stood up cautiously, my attention drawn to the texture of the carpet, meeting the doctor's gaze. He shuffled uncomfortably in his chair. "I am not in a position to say whether what you did today was unethical. I have a feeling the comments were not completely suitable. I believe I have completed these sessions and you will need to inform the judge that you do not believe extra counseling will help." Melinda exclaimed in disbelief as I stood up to leave. "So that's it," she exclaimed. 39 years have elapsed in a second. I never imagined you could be so callous and wicked. I think I overestimated you as I departed. I gently said I never imagined you to be a dishonest or promiscuous woman. That was my error. It had been 6 years since my last visit to Normal, and as I drove into the funeral home parking lot, I realized the reception would not begin for another hour, but my daughter wanted me to arrive early so that I could speak with her before the other visitors arrived. She and her husband Nathan were organizing the funeral at my ex-wife's request. 2 days ago they returned to Normal from Washington. Brianna invited me to assist with the preparations or to provide a speech at the service or meeting following the death. She pointed out that Melinda and I had a successful 39-year marriage and I probably understood her better than anybody else. That may be true, but I couldn't deny that in the 8 years after our divorce I hadn't spoken to her much. The last meaningful chat we had was when I called during a visit to the children following our last meeting with Dr. Walling. It seems that there was nothing else to talk about. Brianna seen my car pull up to the funeral home. She hurried away, followed by Nathan and my grandson. Brianna usually greeted me with a kind hug whenever we met one another, even though I hadn't visited their place in a long time. As expected, she did not disappoint me this time, jumping into my arms like a youngster, despite the fact that she was 47 years old. When she fell on me, I had to pause, realizing that at 71 I wasn't as agile as I once was. I hugged her closely, then kissed her on the cheek before gently lowering her to the ground. "Hello, Ellie. This is Lena, my expedition buddy." I introduced a charming woman who, although being only 2 years older than my daughter, exited the car on the passenger side. Lena has kindly consented to accompany me on a 15-hour highway adventure. We took a little break half an hour ago to replenish ourselves after driving for 6 hours today. My daughter and son-in-law were horrified to learn the news. "Did you drive for 8 hours yesterday given your age?" Brianna exclaimed, and he wouldn't let me drive for a single minute. Lena said, "You probably know your father better than anyone else. He is quite picky about who he permits to drive his car. Actually, I drove it before him." Nathan explained, recalling how he did a test drive for my wife before she purchased it for me. When Nathan realized his error, his voice trailed off awkwardly. I sensed his embarrassment and swiftly helped to alleviate the situation. This turned out to be the last gift my wife gave me, and if she hadn't given it to me, I would never have discovered her infidelity. It was simultaneously a blessing and a curse for me. I reflected. Brianna continued. I think she always took it as a curse. She claimed to love you till the end, Dad, yet she felt abandoned by you. I cannot imagine what she was thinking. I continued. She dated this man for 3 more years before he was transferred to Colorado. He never asked her to go with him. I assume she nursed a grudge against him, blaming him for the end of our relationship, even on her deathbed. I believe she was unaware that her family had broken up because of her. I chose not to sit with Brianna, Nathan and the children outside the funeral home during the eulogy. It didn't feel right being there. What a closeness was now a distant memory. During the service, Lena and I sat quietly in the last row. The preacher delivered a touching address about Melinda, which made many people cry, but not me. I cried all of my tears for Melinda a long time ago. After leaving the funeral home, we returned to Melinda's house, where we had previously lived. We were greeted by several old acquaintances I hadn't seen in years, many of whom offered their sympathies. Lena was always helpful, quietly consoling me and holding my hand whenever I needed true confidence. When we walked into the house, Brianna greeted us and I felt like I had returned to the past. Everything looked just like I remembered it. Melinda had not changed anything. Brianna noticed my surprise and said that Melinda had left everything untouched after I left in case I returned. She didn't bother replacing the locks, anticipating. I might return sometime if you still have the key. I'm sure it still works. She said I've retained only the car keys. Since then. I replied, pulling the trophy from my pocket to show her. While Brianna was pouring coffee, I was organizing cups and saucers for the 6 of us, making it easy to find everything while we worked in the kitchen together. She leaned over to me and said gently, "You know, some people thought you were rude and careless for bringing your younger companion to Mom's funeral. I have to admit I understand why they are doing this." I lifted my brow knowingly as Brianna poured the coffee, for everyone gathered at the kitchen table with their mugs. I took a moment to address the primary concern. I've already stated that Lena is my vacation companion, not a love interest. We've been friends in Houston for a long time and she kindly offered to join me on this long and potentially stressful travel. However, I may have overstated my case by referring to her as a friend with privileges, despite the reality that she is simply one of many such friends in my life. My grandson chuckled at my comment, while Brianna and Nathan exchanged shocked looks. Lena, the head of the Quattro Queen Bridge Club, greeted me warmly 8 years ago. Our bond grew swiftly and we soon became inseparable, particularly during her games. Cass' generosity had no limitations. She gradually introduced me to 3 of her closest single friends who were also members of the Bridge Club. These females aged 52 to 60 frequently had company or an escort for various functions. I reneged in embarrassment, prompting Lena to finish the story. As we became older, it became more difficult for all of us to meet single guys like your dad. As a result, all 4, or rather 5, of us reached an agreement. This arrangement ensured that we would all be healthy and free of jealousy, with no more than 2 persons engaging at a time. After all, we don't want to overburden your father. Lee and Nathan K. stated. Ellie and Nathan still appeared perplexed. Let me know if you require any assistance. Your father is in excellent health for his age. My dears. There are medications that can help you cope with some challenges, and you know a man's intelligence never fades, right? Brianna and Nathan had an easy moment of understanding. My grandson found the entire exchange amusing. Everyone, including myself, assumed that I would end up alone and bitter, but looking back, I think everything went really well for this old man. Here is the next story. My wife was excited as I walked through the door. She rushed over to me and gave me a big kiss as a hello. Then he turned and went to the kitchen to finish cooking dinner. I prepared your favorite dish tonight. I have some vital news to share and I thought we might celebrate it together. That's wonderful, sweetie. I said I've also got some vital news. Perhaps we can hold a double celebration. It was Friday evening and the work week had ended while she was finishing up in the kitchen. I went into the bedroom to shower and change into casual clothes, since I didn't have to work tomorrow. I was looking forward to a long night of making love with my wife. I had crucial news that I knew she'd be quite excited about. I was dizzy with excitement about hearing her news and then sharing mine. My name is Carter Doze. My wife's name is Isabella. We've been married for 7 years and are both 30 years old. I'm 188 centimeters tall and weigh 95 kilograms. Depending on the day, you can gain or lose a kilo or two, and I'm in fairly terrific shape. While I'm not a heartthrob, I've been told several times that I look better than average. I've also been advised that my size is slightly over average. If you get my drift, Isabella is 168 centimeters tall and weighs approximately 50 kilograms. She is also in great form. We both work out in the gym. She has long blonde hair, brown eyes and a stunning physique. I was pretty sure I knew what her news was. We recently began attempting to increase our family. She stopped using birth control pills a few months ago and we've been having lots of sex ever since. Don't get me wrong, we weren't celibate before then. After our first year of living together, we had sex roughly 3 times each week. Before then it happened almost every night. Since she stopped taking the medicines, we have been having sex more frequently again. It was only postponed on days when I had to travel out of town. I didn't travel often for work. Usually I was in my office by 7:00 a.m. I left work at 5:00 p.m. I'm mechanical engineer. My schedule only changes when I need to attend a conference or seminar, which occurs roughly once every quarter. A few months ago I was promoted to engineering manager, so I managed 5 junior engineers, 3 technical specialists and a few secretaries. I also have a personal secretary. Isabella is a pargal for a small law company in the city. She is one of 3 pargal in an office of 5 attorneys. Her schedule is nearly as consistent as mine. The only difference is when problems emerge and she needs to work later in the evening after showering and changing. I entered the kitchen just as Isabella was arranging the table. She'd gone all out tonight. I believe she had taken the day off to get ready for the evening. She prepared chicken scallops, a delicious Caesar salad and garlic toast. She even prepared tiramisu for dessert. She had uncorked a few bottles of excellent Mero. Her news was clearly impressive. I was looking forward to our talk tonight. I also noted that she was dressed nicely for the event. She was dressed in one of her shortest, sexiest gowns, with a plunging neckline, cleavage and legs on display. It appeared that she was also looking forward to a wild and passionate night. After dinner and dessert, I helped to clear the table and clean up the kitchen. We filled our glasses with wine and went to the living room to share our good news with one another. We sat on the couch sipping our wine and, as always, debating who would go first. She was overjoyed and I wondered how she had managed to hold back for so long. To be honest, I expected it to come out spontaneously. We did it. Honey, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby. She virtually shrieked. That is awesome, I exclaimed, expressing my delight at the news. She flung herself into my arms, kissing me fiercely. We kissed deeply and embraced each other, allowing the delight to overpower us. Finally, she stepped back and inquired about my news. I was almost as eager about my announcement as she was about hers. With a big smile and an expression of eagerness, I told her about my good news. My secretary Yifa is also pregnant, since she is single and does not want to raise a child alone. We have decided that she will simply give us her baby to raise. They'll be as close as twins, because you and Josephia will give birth around the same time. They will be identical, save for biology. Since I am the father, there will be no custody concerns, especially because she is more than happy to hand over custody to me. All she wants is to be the child's favorite aunt. We'll definitely need to explain this to the child when they're old enough to understand, but that shouldn't be too difficult. I happily communicated this to my wife. Oddly, I detected a distinct lack of happiness on her face when she received this news. In fact, she appeared irritated. She had just told me that her family was about to expand, and I had just told her that it would double in size. I expected my news to make her even happier. Instead, it appeared that her euphoria had vanished, giving way to intense anger. I was honestly stunned. Her expression of tremendous stress caused me to pause before continuing with my news. I decided she needed to know, and perhaps it would change her mood from upset to pleased. Her initial ultrasound also revealed that she is having twins. Although it is too early to tell, there's a high possibility that at least one of them is female. Just imagine having the little daughter you've always wanted, and I can have a little boy. Whoever you give birth to will be an added bonus. You will immediately have the large family you have always desired. I didn't grasp what was going on. Instead of being overjoyed with this news, she appeared to become even furious in comparison. The explosion occurred quickly. Hiroshima resembled a failed firecracker. You bastard, you cheated on me with that office. What kind of foolish thoughts run through your mind if you think I would ever consider raising that bitch's illegitimate children? Are you out of your mind? Everything went downhill for the following half hour. She screamed every abuse imaginable at me. I believe she even created a few new ones. This was nothing what I had envisioned. I began to realize that my night of passionate love-making would not materialize, but that didn't stop me. Sweetie, how about we head to the bedroom and enjoy our good news together? I'm confident that after a night of intense love-making, we'll have a lot better understanding of what our lives will be like with 3 new children joining our beloved family. I was startled that she not only rejected me outright, but also attempted to kick me out of my own bed, so if she didn't want to sleep with me, she could find another bed. In a flash of wrath, she grabbed some pillows and walked away to the other bedroom. Honestly, I was perplexed by her attitude, because I believed I had done nothing wrong. I turned over and slept soundly all night. The next morning I unsuccessfully attempted to entice my wife back into our bed for some love-making. She was irrationally angry at me. I simply couldn't understand her problem. Seeing as she was being unreasonable, I decided to take advantage of the good weather and went golfing. It was an amazing day. I ended up in a threesome with one man's wife and her sister. We had a terrific time, and then I won a bet against my wife's unmarried sister. I got 2 shots in 3 hours. After the round concluded, I left her house after meeting both her and my requirements. When I came home, I discovered that my garage door opener was not working. This was bizarre. I shut off the engine and approached the front door. Oddly, I noticed numerous luggage packed on the front porch. Without understanding what they were, I ignored them and grasped the doorknob. I discovered that the front door was locked. That wasn't terribly surprising. What was so surprising was that my key did not fit the locks. Looking closer at the locks, I noticed they looked brand new. Strange. Isabella had never addressed the need for new locks on the doors. In any event, I was hot and fatigued and needed to come inside, take a shower and change my clothing. As a practical person, I simply took a saw from my car and cut around the door handle and deadbolt. When the handle and deadbolt were removed from the rest of the door, it swung open effortlessly. I decided to go to Lowe's and buy a new front door. When I entered the house, Isabella launched another rant. She mentioned that I was moving out and that my clothes were packed in luggage outside. Hearing this, I went out and returned the baggage to my bedroom, opening them. I noticed that all of my clothes were in them. It took me a few minutes to put everything back in its proper drawers and closet. While she continued to yell, I undressed and switched on the water. Her raving became more intense as she recognized Aria's aroma and dampness on me seriously. I couldn't understand her problem. Sure, I slept with Aria, but it was only once a one-day meeting. It was only sex. I scarcely know her. I invited Isabella to join me in the shower, but she declined. She clearly had some psychological difficulties that needed to be addressed. I might bring this up later tonight and recommend some counseling. After a lovely shower, I headed to my bedroom to change. To my amazement, I discovered Isabella in the process of packing all of her clothes into the newly empty luggage. When I asked her what she was doing, she replied that because I refused to move out she would. Apparently, while I was showering, she contacted her sister and agreed to stay with her. My notion that her pregnancy had thrown her hormones out of balance, leading her to act strangely, was met with outrage. I was certain that this was the underlying cause for her unusual behavior. I believed that once she delivered the baby and my secretary's twins arrived home, she would be an excellent mother to all 3 children. I was perplexed by her reaction. She left about an hour later. A few days later I moved Rosetta into my home. She would require some assistance during her pregnancy, and since Isabella was no longer present, it felt like the appropriate thing to do. After all, those twins were mine. Isabella should have been able to understand her husband's lack of sexual activity. I even invited Aria over a couple times. Usually it was one-on-one, although there was the occasional threesome with Josiah and Aria. It found out that Oa and Aria were both bisexual. A week after Isabella left, I received divorce papers. She asked the home for 18 years of alimony, 90 of our assets and investments, plus $1,500 each month in child support. In short, she fully complied with the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement. We included it as a rather severe punishment for cheating. Yes, I knew about it. Yes, I slept with only Sat and Aria. Yes, all of you listening to this probably believe I'm a jerk who deserves to be burnt. Go ahead and laugh all you want. 3 months later. What the hell, that was my wife, Isabella. This was our first meeting with the lawyers. We were in her attorney's office discussing our divorce. She planned to punish me for infidelity. I had to admit it. She had the right tool for this, and there's plenty of evidence. Our prenup was constructed so that adultery would be terrible, extremely painful. The fact that I had impregnated my secretary and made no secret of my sexual relationship with Aria provided her with the ideal weapon for severe retribution. There was simply one tiny issue. Are you certain you want to go down this path, Isabella? You cheated on me. Your secretary got you pregnant and you had the audacity to assume I would want to discuss those issues. Children, okay, Isabella, right here and now I am offering a one-time offer. We call off our divorce, come back together and nurture all 3 children as our own. We shall forget the past and return to each other. Our 3 children will be ours alone. Yes, Gisette will be the twins' favorite aunt, but nothing more. You'll be a wonderful mother to all 3, and I'll be a caring father. Perhaps we'll have more children. It's your decision, yes or no. I made an offer you. I will not raise your illegitimate children with that scum. I looked at my lawyer and nodded. She replied to my nod. Unfortunately, my wife did not hire the most aggressive, merciless, ravenous and vicious shark in the world. Luckily I did. Now you are probably thinking I'm a jerk for cheating on my wife. I can see your saliva streaming at the image of me being burned to ashes. Hold on to your chairs. My attorney opened her briefcase with a smile that made me think of a barracuda about to burst into a rage. Since your client turned down my client's generous offer, here is our fresh offer, she said, moving the papers across the table. It took Isabella and her attorney a few minutes to read and comprehend the document. That's when Isabella had the aforementioned eruption of wrath and her demeanor went from arrogant to panicked. Lilith. My lawyer opened her lips and swallowed. Yes, she was absolutely ruthless. Isabella's attorney turned to face her. His look was one of absolute terror. DNA test. Isabella stammered, of course. Lilith gave another nod and pulled out an audio recorder which she placed on the table. She pushed the button. So how will you make sure it's my child and not his? The voice on the recording belonged to Jason West, an attorney at the firm where Isabella worked. No problem, Isabella replied. I always use a diaphragm for intercourse with him. Besides, you look sufficiently like my husband that he won't realize is parenting your child good. Allow him to raise my child appropriately. I'm not going to pay for any children or deal with them. I truly like the thought of having a child to pass down my heritage to, but that should happen once they've grown up. When the child reaches the age of 18, we will be able to tell who the real father is. That way, I won't have to pay anything for raising children. Carter won't know. Until we tell him. In 18 years. Carter and I will have had several more children by then, and he will be powerless to intervene without looking ridiculous. So you are confident your husband will not find out about us? We've had an affair for 3 years and he has no idea. You look so much like him that any child we produce will bear a striking resemblance, and you will never guess it isn't. His everything will be okay. Isabella's reaction, as the recording played, was priceless. Then Lilith demanded a DNA test for her fetus. She also gave over a child support petition signed by Jason West. I requested $2,000 each month. He was a relatively successful attorney, so since your client rejected the last offer, here is a new proposition. This of course necessitates a future agreement signed by both parties. The divorce will be stayed and the couple will remain married until their youngest kid completes high school. That's the minimum. If they both agree to stay married after that, they are free to do so. The succeeding agreement will include the prenuptial contract's terms, but with certain amendments. First, the marriage will be open, allowing my client to have sex with other women as long as he informs his wife prior to the date. The wife is also free to have sex with other partners under the same terms. I observed Isabella's face turn totally white. She was completely surprised that her affair had been discovered. Lilith put on her shark-like smirk and continued. If your client refuses this offer, we are fully prepared to enforce the prenuptial agreement from our end. Her affair started 3 years before my client's affair. In fact, he began his affair after meticulously recording his wife's adultery and destined to have a child with another man. If she wants to go through with the divorce, she should be prepared to be homeless and have graphic video recordings of her sexual actions with another guy, shared with all of her friends and family. We are completely prepared for total destruction. She stared at me and nodded, allowing me to continue. Isabella, you asked me to raise another man's child, yet the child inside you. As an innocent victim of your betrayal, I will not be financially responsible for him. I am willing to accept the child as a stepson, as long as his father bears financial obligation. He will provide monthly assistance for his child, as well as medical insurance, medical bills and educational expenses. Although I doubt he'll want to see the child, he'll have the option. He will also pay for his child's college education. In all other aspects, I will treat the child as if he were my own. This is the price of his acts. He stated that he did not want to assume responsibility for the child, but that is exactly what he will receive. Your betrayal will result in raising my children as your own. They will be your children in every ways except biologically, the only ones who will realize they are not biologically yours, and everyone in this room, including Gisette. You thought it would be humorous if I raised another man's child. Now you may chuckle while rearing another woman's children. You will also be delighted to see Gisette in her house anytime she wishes to visit the youngsters. This is your penance. You dare to divorce me over sex with another lady after having a long-term affair with another man. How hypocritical of you. My affair began just after I learned about your betrayal. I heard you were going to have a child with another man 5 years later. So you're saying Aunt Josie is real? Audrey stammered and trailed off. So what about Uncle Dan? And he asked. Yes, Gisette had twins. Audrey was born 1 minute before Ethan Lenny. Isabella's kid had arrived 3 days earlier. When we revealed the triplets to our friends and family, there were a lot of shocked looks. Everyone eventually came to accept it. There were a few questions concerning Audrey and Ethan's red hair. Darn recessive genes. No, Uncle Dan arrived later. Your Aunt Gisette had become pregnant while single, and she believed it would be best for you two to be in a family. We were great friends, and I decided to adopt both of you because she was unable to raise you as a single mom by the time she met and married Uncle Dan. There would have been too much pain to change anything. Now that you know the truth, you must understand that your mother and I sincerely adore you as our own children. Nothing has changed in that aspect. Please keep in mind that your biological mother has her own family. You will always have a particular place in their hearts, but that doesn't change the fact that we are all one family. Here I concluded that they were brilliant children. They understood. Did we really have to inform them? Maybe, perhaps not. There are compelling arguments for both sides. We decided they should know, so we told them. We also informed Lenny that I am not his biological father. That was a little different. He never intended that jackass attempted to challenge the paternity allegation, but DNA is DNA. He attempted not to pay. However, judges become upset when you attempt to disobey their rulings. Judges also have sheriff's deputies who can visit persons in their homes and offices. Oh, all that talk about open marriage. I hooked up with Aria a few more times in Giuseppia, and I had a flirtation for approximately a year before meeting Dan. I'm very sure Isabella never indulged her desires. Nevertheless, I maintained a careful check on her after Josina and I dissolved our relationship. I stopped engaging in extramarital activities. I concluded that Isabella had learned her lesson, but I would have started over if I had discovered she was having another affair. As far as I could tell, she didn't, and I paid great attention. Furthermore, she began trying to have sex with me until I was exhausted, ensuring that I didn't need anyone else. It worked both ways. Jason West vanished shortly after Carter's 18th birthday after establishing an account to pay Lenny's education. We invited Jason to visit, but he declined. There were speculations that he relocated to the East Coast. More plausible rumors indicated that he was now around 5 miles east of the coast. Of course, just a few people knew about the rumor. Yes, I was a patient man when it came to settling disputes. He couldn't skip his child support and college fund installments. As for Isabella and me, what can I say? It's been 19 years since our minor issue. I conducted my due diligence and discovered nothing. She became an excellent wife and mother. I'm thinking about retiring early once the kids leave home. Some may accuse me of being weak for returning her affection. Yes, I could have burned her to the ground, but what would that have provided me? Who knows? Maybe Gisette and I could have gotten together. The point is moot. I had no issue raising another man's child. Sure, I was his father, but I viewed it differently. Jason has paid for his upbringing. I used the chance to ensure that the youngster was properly raised and did not become another jerk. I also made my wife raise another woman's children. It was a continual reminder to her that I had slept with another woman and made her pregnant. She also understood that while her partner had to pay for his child, she was responsible for Gisette. His children staying with Isabella ensured that our 3 children grew up in a loving family environment with both parents. That is far more significant than what others think about me. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.